Hello everyone, and welcome to our training for TELPAS writing sample collections for the spring of 2020. I'm Troy Lemons, our campus testing coordinator, and I've got my friend here, Chewbacca, as you can see. He's very excited to be with you today and help us with this training. But really our purpose today is to make sure that you know the procedures so that we have a really positive TELPAS administration for this school year. So the agenda for this training for today, we're going to talk about what TELPAS is. Some of you may not have any idea or inklings of what TELPAS really is about. We're going to talk about samples that are going to be collected, when to do those samples, who do you turn those samples to, and when are those samples going to be due. As stated in every training that I provide to you guys, just remember that the training that I go through here today doesn't take the place of reading the appropriate manuals and materials from the state. With TELPAS especially, it can become a little bit confusing for some teachers at times, and so we have this training here. There's also a state training that you can do that's online that kind of goes over a lot of this information as well. And so that's a really good backup piece if you have a little bit of concerns about what your duties are with writing sample collection as it pertains to TELPAS. So what is TELPAS? TELPAS is the state-designed assessment for our EL students. This is part of federal law, and I'm going to talk about that more here in just a minute. But this is what our state has come up with to test the progress of our ELL students and how they are doing in terms of acquiring the language here in the U.S. Why do we do TELPAS? Like I said, TELPAS is federal law. It's part of a federal statute. The law gives forth states the opportunity and requirement to have an assessment for EL students in these 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So like I just said, the writing collection is a part of the 4 domains. So listening, speaking, and reading is tested in a different way, but writing, what you guys are doing, what you are collecting from your students in class, that is the part that we use to assess our students on their writing. So this is a really important slide here. This is some dates for you guys to have in the back of your mind, maybe put it onto your calendar to be sure that you're following the procedures we have set out for TELPAS. So prior to February the 10th, you cannot collect any samples for TELPAS. So if you do any writings in class before that point, you cannot submit them as part of your sample for TELPAS. Anything after that, between 2:10 and the end of the TELPAS window, is acceptable. But what we do here at AHS is we actually develop a schedule for you all to make it a little bit easier to kind of keep things in line and make sure that we get those things done and we get it collected in a timely fashion so that we can get it back to our raters and get them verified and get the assessments completed. So if you're in the social studies department, you're going to collect your sample on February the 11th and February the 12th. Those samples are going to be due to your department head, Mrs. Terry, on the 13th. Math department, you're going to do your samples on the 13th and 14th of February, and you're going to turn those samples in to Mrs. Hyder on the 17th. Science department, you're going to do yours on the 18th and 19th, and you're going to turn those in to Miss Mystery on the 20th. And then with our ELA department, we are going to collect 2 samples from each one of our ELA teachers, and so you've got a little bit longer time to work through the window. You can start on the 11th, but what we want to see is that both of your samples are done, completed, and back to the student's rater by the 25th. Most of you in the English department, you guys are the raters, so it's not going to be as much as you going and taking those samples to somebody else. You're just going to be collecting, and those samples are going to be put together. Raters, the samples from our raters are going to be due to Dr. Allen with the labels affixed to them on February the 28th. So what is the goal in assembling the writing collection? It is to make sure that the collection portrays the student's overall English language writing proficiency. This is not about writing a beautifully crafted essay per se. It's about where the student is and how they are going about and how they're progressing in acquiring the English language. So in grades 2 through 12, this is what writing sample collection looks like. It's a little bit different in K-1, but we're just not going to go over that because it doesn't pertain to what we are going to do here on the high school level. So each student has to have 5 samples in their writing collection. Some of them are required, some of them are additional pieces that you can put in. So number 1, a writing that elicits the use of past tense. That is a required piece. An academic writing from math, science, or social studies. And so you can see there's 2 of them there. So 3 of them are required. The past tense, the academic writing from math, science, or social studies. So you have 1 past tense and then 2 academic pieces. The 4th or 5th can be from any of the identified types, and we're going to talk about those in the upcoming slides that are coming through in the next couple of pictures. So type 1, when we look at, and you're going to be given like, well, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5, what does that mean? So type 1 writing is a basic descriptive writing on a personal, familiar topic. So what you're going to see in the next several slides is a lot of examples, but these examples are not exhaustive, and as a matter of fact, a lot of them are probably too lower level for high school students anyways. But a type 1 could be a very simple thing like writing about yourself, describing what you see from a photograph, comparing yourself to someone else, comparing pictures, biographical information, things along those lines. Type 2 writings are writings about a familiar process. So there's some examples here like writing about your routine. So how do you get to school? How do you go home? What do you do on the weekends? How do you prepare a familiar food or recipe? So you would use that to describe how you would actually do that particular task, or how to play a game or a familiar sport. Type 3, this is one of the must-haves. This is writing that elicits the use of past tense. So it could be a story based on something shown in a picture, a narrative about something that they did in the past, some kind of original story that they have composed but is written in the past tense, something that they had done like a personal narrative that they had done beforehand, or something that they have learned about in the past. And so like they're really looking for detail. The more vivid and the better language that they can use, it really shows how far they've come when writing these types of samples. A type 4 is a personal narrative or reflective piece. You can see here are some examples, writing about someone they admire, what was it like when they came to the United States for the first time, what does friendship look like to you. Type 5 is an expository or other extended writing on a topic from language arts. So with our language arts classes, we're going to do the 2 samples, like I said. One of them is going to be the type 3, the writing that lists the use of past tense. The second writing that you will do in English class will be this number 5. So it's some kind of expository or extended language writing. You see some examples here. Generally speaking, anything that you guys are going to be doing or need to be writing in your classes would fit for this in the English department. Type 6 are expository or procedural writing from science, math, and social studies. And so each student needs 2 of these in their writing sample collection. So they will need something from their math class, their science class, and their social studies class. There are some examples here. This has to be considered relevant academic work. It should be part of the traditional teach that you're teaching at that time. It shouldn't be something that is not relevant to what you're doing. So some examples you see here in science, you're talking about, how do you use the labs, how do you use certain equipment, explaining the steps in an experiment, talking about a process that they've learned about. In mathematics, it could be something about how you've used math outside of school. How do you use the steps of a mathematical equation to solve something? Write about what you're learning in your math class. In social studies, it can be, write about a historical figure, an expository piece about an important event or something that's current, something you're learning in your class, defending a point of view about, a government policy or controversial issue, so taking a side in a debate, or writing persuasive speech about changing something that, a policy change or a law or something like along those lines. So each sample should fit in one of the types that we just described, but I mean, like I said, those things that they list there that comes from TEA, that's not an exhaustive list by any means. Essentially, if it's authentic classroom activities grounded in what you are doing from your TEKS and the English language proficiency standards, you're going to find that those types of samples are going to work for your class. So the types of papers that are shown on this slide here should be avoided because they interfere with the ability to measure a student's overall English language proficiency. They shouldn't have anything with copied language. You know, you're going to see that some kids are going to, it's normal and appropriate for them to refer to instructional material, but you don't want them copying sentences or paragraphs or anything from, you know, some kind of a resource. Use of a dictionary and thesaurus is normal in instructional practice, but you know, they should not, if the student really relied so heavily on a dictionary that it obscured their ability to portray what they can really write about, then they probably shouldn't use that as well. Anything that's like a brief or incomplete or a rush paper, a student's English language proficiency level should be considered when determining whether a paper is too brief or incomplete. It's expected that the limited English of beginning students will cause some writings to be brief, but students should be given plenty of time to complete their writing assignments. So essentially, you know your kiddos and you know how they write, and if they are, you know, just trying to rush through one of these pieces, you should get it back to them and let them work on it again. And furthermore, make sure that you're giving them enough time in class to make sure that they are able to put down their thoughts on paper like they're supposed to. With beginning students, you know, the ELPs are there and they call for accommodating the instruction for some of those, some of those students, especially commensurate with their language proficiency of the student. So it is perfectly okay to adapt their writing tasks to beginning ELs, just as an example of linguistically accommodating, you know, like communicating, scaffolding, just like you would do in a traditional classroom instruction. So it's expected that the limited English of some students will cause some of them to be brief. But like I said before, you know your students and you know how they are. So if they are a pretty advanced student and they're writing on a very low level, that should set up a red flag for you to have them do a better job. So a few last tips. Make sure that you're building collections that have a balance of writing from, so that's why we're going to have core areas and language arts. We want the collections to show what the student knows and also really what they struggle with, because, you know, we want to see students stretched. And sometimes when you stretch a student, sometimes you see where they kind of struggle at. You know, remember the ideal goal with this is to be able to look at and be able to portray what the student's overall language proficiency is in terms of writing. Like I said, if they're capable of expressing themselves in a detailed way, they should do so. You know, you should really consider what the kids are, what their abilities are in terms of whether or not you're going to accept an example from them or not. Classroom teachers' responsibilities, so those of you that are collecting the actual samples themselves, remember, like I said, it's authentic student writing that's part of the regular TEKS-based instruction. You know, we said content areas in the core classes, we're gonna collect them. These students that are ELL should not be sent to an EL facilitator to produce their writing samples. That means they should be done in class. Writing samples should not be completed all in one day. That's why we help you out with the schedule, because we know that some of these students, you know, if we get too many of them going on one day, they have a tendency to cause an issue and they don't get the best examples and best writings that they could do. Writing samples must have the student's full legal name and date on each piece of writing. Don't have them use a nickname. Tell them this is an important this type of writing. They need their legal name. And carefully review the handouts and different things that we're going to give you, and make sure that, you know, when students are turning in, they are in accordance with TA requirements. Rater responsibilities during writing collection. You raters are going to be the ones that are assembling the writing collections according to the criteria of the manual. The rater is responsible for making sure that the papers are there, that the right number of papers are there, and they meet the standards that are met. Now, this does not mean that the teachers that are collecting the writing samples are off the, they have to help raters with this to make sure that they're not getting things that were used with a dictionary or polished or, brief or incomplete. The rater will complete the rater portion of the writing verification checklist, and you will adhere the label to the writing sample before submitting them to Dr. Allen, our verifier. So here are some other places where you can find resources about TELPAS. The District and Campus Coordinators Resources site, that's available online. The TELPAS Rater and Test Administrator Manual. The online course titled Assembling and Verifying Grades 2 through 12 Writing Collection. I will send that out to everyone who is a writing sample collector. That is that additional course that I talked about. That is a TEA developed course that can also help you with some of these things if you're a little bit more confused. And then always the most relevant resources that we have is always going to be available on the AISD Assessment Department TELPAS page. You have to sign into the intranet to be able to access all the resources, but the link is provided here, and that's where you will find the most up-to-date and best information as it pertains to TELPAS. As always, we are here for questions. If you have questions about TELPAS and the procedures, you can surely reach out to myself or Dr. Allen, and we'll be happy to help you out the best we can. If we don't know your answers, we will go above us and we will find someone who knows what we need to do to get you going. So thank you so much for your attention and your time today, and have a good one.